Hey guys, this is VaulSC. Hope that you're having a good week. Today we're going to be reviewing the new ITS Season Pack, Thunderclap, ITS Season 14, and just to let you know, I will be just giving an overview of what's new and what's changed and what's interesting. This will not be a full review of every single little mission because a lot of it's unchanged. A lot of it is just the same tired old stuff that we've had for so many seasons because Cobber Speller doesn't really have the willingness, I suppose, to really overhaul a lot of stuff. They're just keen to do a few rollouts of a few little changes here and there. And we'll be talking about that. And I'll also be going over a little bit of the news, some of the new changes to Army Builder, which have come out at the same time, and a couple of forum posts. And we're going to go over that. So join me. Hopefully this is a good time. Stick with me, leave me a comment. Before we dive fully into the review, of course, I have to talk about my favorite thing in the world, which is Table Game Fun Times. My YouTube show where we do a sitcom that involves a lot of Infinity cinematics. So if you like the look of what you're seeing on screen right now, please check out this link right up here if you want to watch more. I highly recommend it. With that out of the way, let's dive into the news. So, Thunderclap is out. It really only contains one new mission. We will talk a little bit about that mission today. There are some things which are gone. For example, the free bike's gone, but it's been replaced in some missions by a free Bashi Bazook or CSU. Maybe let's talk about that first. So, that's an interesting one. I was always opposed to the free bike, and there are a couple of reasons why. So, reason number one is that the bike has booty, which is a randomly rolled skill, meaning that I can roll up mimetism -6 on mine, and you can get a close combat weapon, and that's just not fair. The game already has a lot of variants and stuff that's just based on lucky dice rolls, so we've got plenty of that. We didn't really need an additional layer of that for ITS, so that's a reason why. Another reason is that it kind of dilutes the faction identity a little bit. You've got, you combine army list with a bike and your nomads list with a bike. Everyone's got a bike. It's just, not really what I think of when I think of sort of role playing as a faction for Infinity. So that's another reason why as well. I mean, ultimately, it feels like it was a little bit of a incentive for them to a reason for them to just sell a few more bike models. So there is that. With Bounty Hunters being replaced by CSUs and Bashi Bazooks, you've still kind of got the same problem in there. The reason why I find it a bit more tolerable, I suppose, is that at least you're not looking at booty on any of those units. The CSU does have metachemistry, but the metachemistry roll is not going to be as impactful as some of the rolls that you can get on your Bounty Hunter, right? Some of the stuff you get on a bike Bounty Hunter really does make a difference. So look, I can't really spend a lot of time complaining about it. It's just not going to do any good. We've got a Bashi Bazook and a CSU here to stay, and that's just what competitive Infinity is going to be like. If you ever play in my tournaments, there will never be free stuff just added to your list in that same way. There will be some additions. There's plenty of homebrew stuff. You can have a Camcore in my campaigns, but we're not going to be having Bashi Bazooks and whatnot. The other thing that's happened with this document is that we are now seeing a big buff to sensor bots. So let's have a talk about that and a think about that. Every remote that has the repeater and sensor ability, let's just go find it just so we can have a good look at it. Where are we? It's under like Takimoto's or something like that. Here we go here. Okay, so Tactical Awareness, Marksmanship, ECM Hacker, which are three really big buffs to bots which we thought were fairly balanced. And it applies to Forward Observer Special Skill and Repeater Skill. So it's not just sensor bots. For example, I think that one of the Nomad units, Zoe and Pywell, I can't remember, but I heard some talk that one of those guys got it, which it just seems a little bit strange to me that they've got a game where a lot of Infinity units are actually balanced. They're actually fine. And you have to go and just identify something for the sake of novelty, make it a whole lot better. And this does really supercharge those particular units. And again, it's not really done in a level-headed way. It's not really done in a way that enhances Infinity competition. It's just a novelty. And I think there'll be plenty of people in the community that are sort of celebrating this because it gives them a chance to use sensor bots where they weren't before. But sensor bots were already reasonably viable, so it just doesn't make sense to me to buff them that much. You could have just given them marksmanship or just given them tactical awareness, and that would be, fine as a novelty way of bringing them to the forefront of competition. But slapping all three of them on there means that they're now going to just really be head and shoulders over a lot of other choices for some factions. If I'm playing vanilla Pan-Oceania, I'm probably likely to take, those Pathfinders. Similarly with, I think, Nomads, obviously you try and get in the tactical awareness, little bits and pieces as much as you can. For Hakislam, I'm pretty sure we're going to be seeing their sensor bots coming around. So yeah, I mean, it's a thing. It's here to stay. I'm really just reporting the news here. I don't agree with it. I think that this is just a little bit too ham-fisted. There were plenty of other things in the game that needed attention. And if you're going to buff a type of unit, why not buff something that we just almost never see? For example, the Silhouette 4 baggage bot that has the TR, the Total Reaction Combi Rifle, for example. Why not make that a whole lot stronger, for example? Or why not try and, help out some of the medium infantry troopers like Rodox or even Govards or something like that, which we barely see. Units like that, giving them some sort of little buff. That's something they could have done in ITS, but they haven't. So that's how we're looking, right? Other than that, not too many changes. Really, we're seeing a very conservative update, which is why I'm not really going to go through a lot of this pack and talk about it. We are going to see some subtle changes in the little missions here and there, but overall they function in the same way until we get to cryogenics. Let's deal with some other stuff that's happened in the news. So, we did have a changelog here for Army 7, and I'm not going to go through it line by line and comment on each little bit. A, because I'm going to get it wrong. B, because usually there are mistakes in these posts anyway. And C, a lot of these aren't really big, impactful, meaningful changes for ITS, right? I'll talk about the two biggest ones that I really care about. So we have one here. The Tiger Creature has gone up from 6 points to 7 points for the double action profile, which everyone takes. And importantly, its movement is 6'4" instead of 6'6". So that is a nerf. I am really pleased about this change. Tiger Creatures were way too powerful for what points you pay for them. They were a very oppressive unit, and they're a unit that's there are so few counters to. In fact, if you're in the middle of the table with a really valuable but vulnerable unit like Shinobu Kitsune, for example, that unit is just going to get wiped out by a Tiger Creature. Nothing you can do, because the Tiger Creature just dodges around the corner and then berserks you and you're dead. So it can still do that. It's still a really, really powerful unit, and I think that I'll still be putting 4 of them in all of my combined army lists. It's just now I'm penalized a bit. I'm minus 4 points for doing that. And to be honest, combined army were so above the curve in terms of points anyway. There's so much undercosted stuff. They're still probably a good faction, even with this nerf piled on top of the Avatar nerf and the Imatron nerf. They were that broken that this still has only sort of reined them down to a sort of a level where they are strong, okay? The thing I think that really hits home for most people who are competitive and are familiar with this game is the absence of other nerfs that have gone along with this. So we look at Ariadne and we still see Polaris Bearpods like on the perch, like absolutely top tier, S tier unit, which is a meta breaking unit, and the Unknown Ranger still up there. And we go to Nomads and we still see the Morans still up there, and the Uberfall Commandos and the Puppet Bots and Jazz and Billy are still like right up there. And a lot of that stuff hasn't been touched. So that's really the big story, which continues to be like the narrative in my videos and a lot of discussion that happens on Discord from people who know the game very well, is that Corvus Belli, bless them for making changes. We'll get to this in a minute, but they are making changes very selectively. It's almost like, you pull into the pit stop with your Formula One car and they take all of the wheels off and replace the wheels with new wheels, or the tires, I should say. Except one of the tires, they leave like the tire that's almost worn down, and off you go to keep driving. That's sort of how it feels to see these updates sometimes, is that balance is relative. So, you still got Nomads and Ariadne firmly at the top. They're just absolutely S tier factions, and Combined Army relative to them has come down a little bit. You take the best list you can, and you're paying a little bit more than you were before. Combined Army's still a far better faction than, for example, Pan-Oceania, in my view. Most sectorials, except maybe Cosmoflot. Combined Army is just really head and shoulders ahead of a lot of stuff there. But it's just not done in a way that sort of smoothly balances the game across the board, where you look at all of the factions together, which is sort of what we'd want to see. Another weird little bit here, which I'll briefly comment on, is Zamira Nazarova getting berserk. This is one of the biker chick sisters. Zuleika has been just absolutely broken for a really, really long time. And even though she's been changed, she's still, one of the better units. But the story is that Zamira has gained berserk, which means that you're adding her, both of her movement skills together, and you're just zooming across the table and hitting them with an EMCCW. So this is now the longest threat range berserk unit in the game, and a lot of people have, looked at this and gone, this shouldn't actually be in the game. This is oppressive. This is unfair for the opponent. There's very little you can do to counterplay that, and they're right if they're saying that. It just doesn't make sense. Berserk is a unit. Berserk is a skill, rather, that is really for short-range stuff, and it makes sense on like a Highlander, like a Galwegian, where, if you manage to get that unit successfully through smoke and, out the other side and, into close range with the enemy, and you can berserk from 8 inches away, it can do a little bit of damage there and trade with something cool, and that feels a little bit more reasonable. You use tactics and strategy and so forth, whereas a unit suddenly appearing, 14 inches away or however long it can charge, I don't know what the actual threat range is. It's just too much. And look, they have nerfed the tiger creatures a little bit, so the tiger creatures have got a 10-inch threat range for that instead of 12, which is good. It's come down. Still too much, but it's better than 12. But you're leaving Polaris Bearpods at 12, and you've got Zamira coming back in there. So it's sort of like, you give with one hand and you take with another. It's kind of baffling. Just going to pause here and just deliver really the moral that I often deliver in these videos, and I feel like I'm just going to keep saying this every time we do a big analysis video for Corvus Belli, and it's this. Infinity, the game, is very much playable. It's a good competitive game. It's better than Warhammer 40,000. You can successfully go along to an ITS event and have a good time, and your decisions and your performance will matter, and the ranking at the end of the day will generally rank the better performing players at the top and the worst down the bottom. That's what we want to see. It's an actual fair tournament. So you've got that right there. Secondarily, this game does have a lot of broken stuff in it. There's tons of things in this game which need to be tweaked and don't really work very well and just are nonsensical, all right? So there's definitely agreement on that. And thirdly, Corvus Belli really, really should fix more stuff. They are fixing some stuff, which, we can see in front of us. This is the second patch in a little while, saying to me maybe they'll keep going. Maybe they'll actually start addressing Ariadne and Nomads and some of the things in the game which need addressing and buff the small stuff up. But the point is that you've got those 3 points. Infinity's playable, Infinity's broken. Corvus Belli should fix Infinity. Those 3 different thoughts are completely consistent with each other. You can hold and maintain and believe those 3 things, and there's no inconsistency there. Infinity is a good playable game. Infinity does have things wrong with it. Infinity could be better. Infinity ought to be better. It's not that hard to fix it and make changes. The analogies I've used in the past. Got a car with a cracked windscreen, it's still drivable, but it's easy to fix the crack in the windscreen, and you may as well, because it's just not that hard. So, what would we like to see in future? Just addressing some of the units which are still outstanding. If Morans, for example, had a points increase, or if they went from having a repeater right from the get-go to having a deployable repeater instead. If Polaris Bearpods, for example, had a speed debuff or a points increase, something like that. Unknown Ranger changed around a little bit so that sometimes you consider some of the other heavy infantry with, big guns in Ariadne, make the game a bit more interesting for list building. That is the kind of changes that we want to see a little bit more. Also in the news, I wanted to sort of tell this little story here because I find this absolutely fascinating. There's a gentleman called Hellois who is the manager for the ITS, the Infinity Tournament System for Corvus Belli. Bless his heart, he's a nice guy. But he made a post which raised some eyebrows recently. He said that with regards to remote presence being a rule that the Avatar has, that it actually didn't have that rule and never has, not even in 3. And he said that in response to a few people pointing out, in the recent changes, the Avatar actually lost remote presence. For those of you guys who don't know, remote presence is a rule where if the model goes unconscious and then takes a further wound, it's not actually removed from the table. It drops down to a second level of unconscious. So it's harder to get the model off the board if it has remote presence. Secondarily, if you're an engineer and you're trying to revive an unconscious model that has that rule, remote presence, you get a reroll when you fail your attempt if you're willing to spend a command token on it. So generally, it adds survivability to a model to have that rule. People have pointed out that the Avatar didn't use it very often, but I would argue that just merely having it there is something which helps the Avatar, makes it a little bit more powerful, and it didn't need that additional level of ability, that additional capability, that additional buff, and yet it had that ability right throughout N4, which is approximately a 2-year period of time. So Hellois made this post on the forum saying, actually, no, it never actually had that rule. Not in N3, not in N4, basically. And people correctly came along and corrected him and said, actually, hang on, no, the unit did have that rule in N4. It got added to N4. And recently I posted in response to this, and I said, because he then goes on to say, it was actually a mistake, right? So this is his comment here. It was a mistake with reference to us showing him that it had a remote presence. And what I said then is, I said to him, are you referring to, making a mistake about saying that it didn't have remote presence in N4? Like, you said that it didn't have it for a 2-year period when it actually did. Are you just making a mistake about telling us that? Which would be completely believable and forgivable, by the way. I mean, I'm making mistakes in this very video with stuff that I say. I mean, I'm getting little things wrong. It's just a natural thing to do. So if that's the case, no worries. But if what he was actually saying is that it was a mistake that Corvus Belli put that rule into the game and left it there for us to use for a 2-year period of time, that would be a different story. And if true, that kind of confirms our suspicion that Corvus Belli, I don't want to say that they're completely incompetent. I would rather say that they just don't particularly care about the competitive side of Infinity. To them, it was intended to be more of a casual game. It just happened to get picked up by a lot of competitive people who, don't have a better alternative. We're sick of Warhammer 40,000, Privateer Press, War Machine Hordes didn't really work out for us. We've come over to Infinity. We don't like the look of Malifaux. We don't like the look of Flames of War, Bolt Action. We're sticking with Infinity for now, so we want the best from it. But the people who make it don't share that view. They don't share that sort of, let's make this a really good competitive game and look after it and nurture it and fix little details and polish it up. That's not the view that they have. And I think that a little bit of evidence like this sort of helps me sort of persuade the few people in the audience who think that Corvus Belli are these absolute genius gods who are in control of every little detail and, are professionals who are just spending all day, every day perfecting Infinity. If you guys think that, sorry, I'm of the view that that's a little bit naive. Rant over. Let's get back to the Thunderclap pack. Cool. With ITS missions, we've now had a really long time to solve them and to really understand, what makes a mission tick. There are some missions which are all about scoring at the end of the game. For example, this one, Acquisition. And the consensus is now, settled on this idea that you've really got two ways to win only. One way, if you're going first, is to just steamroll the other guy, ignore the objectives completely. If the mission does have the retreat rule, just drop them down to like 76 points minimum. They won't go into retreat, and then casually end the game with all the objectives. That's one strategy. The other strategy is the one you kind of have to go with if you are going second for whatever reason, and that is to stall, delay, trade things with your opponent, try to, bunker up, and in the final turn of the game, just move on to the objectives and you win. And a lot of people are getting a little bit sick of that. We have a mission called Neural Net now, which is in my custom missions, which a lot of people seem to like because it sort of tries to force the strategy back the other way, where you're having to think actively about whether to do more killing or more button pressing on each individual turn, rather than just making a decision about that at the start of the game and then just running with it for the rest of the commitment of the turns. So many ITS missions kind of work like that. Some of them have this thing where you're basically trying to score at the end of every player turn, which is a little bit different. Again, sorry, not player turn, a game round. That is a thing which comes up in, for example, Supremacy. And again, the idea is that if you're going second, you have a much better opportunity to just play the avoidance game and move on to the objectives at the end of each game round because you're going second. Whereas if you're first, same story, you're really better off just trying to steamroll them and then camp the objectives later on. So we are still having to see that in all these missions, and that kind of structure isn't really changing. I'll also just quickly talk about Biotech Vor. This came up in conversation in one of my group chats recently. For players who are new and don't really know why part of the community doesn't like this mission, look, I'll just take a quick moment to spell it out for you. So imagine that I'm a Toha player, and when I'm playing Biotech Vor, I've got some units which have this thing called Symbiont Armor, where if you take if you fail an armor save, you drop down one level of armor and you're not unconscious yet. Meaning that in this mission, where there are these zones next to your deployment which are slowly killing you, you have at least one turn to sort of get out of there later on. You can move some of your units, others of your units take damage, but they can survive that. Then you move out. So Toha are quite good in that respect. Also, they're full of these little Harris link teams. So when you spend an order, you can move 3 guys, and you spend another order, and you move another 3 guys. So that helps them get out of the dangerous zones much more efficiently. And then you've got these guys which throw down this Eclipse grenade-like template, which nothing in the game can see through. Meaning, if your opponent's like set up some snipers to shoot at you while you're trying to flee the damaging zones, well, you've got something you can do against that. You just throw the smoke grenades down, the Eclipse grenades, and then you leave the area. So if I'm playing Toha, I'm pretty happy with this mission. But if I've just gone out and bought a whole lot of shiny new Yu Ching models, and I've painted them up, and I've got my heart set on using them for the next tournament, and some guy who's running the tournament just says, okay, well, let's play Biotech Vor, I'm looking back at my shelf and going, well, I'm going to be punished for the decision to play Yu Ching, aren't I? I mean, they are not going to be anywhere near as effective at this mission as Toha are, so I'm going to be kind of, regretful and miserable about that decision, and it's more to do with me being forced to play that mission than it is me actually buying that army and painting that army. A lot of very experienced Infinity players just understand that concept now, and for that reason, we typically just avoid this mission. So yeah, a lot of this stuff is just the same stuff that we continue to see, so let's just come down to cryogenics, and we'll talk about this one. It's a new mission. I think this mission is not bad, but only relative to the low bar that has been set by ITS missions. Really, these days, we should be focusing more on the custom stuff. That's where it's at for competitive play, in my view. But let's give it a chance and look at it at face value. So, at the end of the game, have activated 2 or more tech coffins. Well, again, that's the kind of thing where, if you're going second, you want to avoid your opponent for a bit and then just activate those tech coffins. And if you're going first, you kind of want to wipe your opponent out and then activate them later. Dominate a quadrant containing an HVT. Weirdly enough, the HVTs only appear when you break them out of the tech coffins, so it's got this cute little mechanic here where you're basically going to each tech coffin and you're rolling a dice, and there's something like a 60% chance of it being empty. I find that kind of interesting because it means that if you go and break open the tech coffins further away from you, it makes it more likely that the ones remaining will have the HVT in them. I don't think that's going to come up in a lot of games, but just bear in mind that the chances of finding an empty one is greater than the chance to actually find one in there. So yeah, just be careful about that and try and plan ahead when you are going and pressing those buttons. Threatened HVT with your Master Breacher is 1 for each threatened HVT, so that's potentially 2, I believe. And having a dominant Master Breacher, that is, again, a Master Breacher is where you just pick a unit in your list, which is very similar to using the data tracker. So threatened HVT, if you've got a trooper in a non-null state inside the HVT's zone of control. All right. This mission does not count if the player already dominates the quadrant containing the HVT. Kind of interesting because there are more than one ways to get objective points, and I think somebody commented that the potential total that you can get is more than 10. I haven't really done the research on that. I just want to, you guys will be able to flesh out the details of this on your own, and I think there will be better commentators than me when it comes to the absolute specifics of this. Nice that they've got a defensive turret in there, just to ward off the alpha strikes. But again, this is a mission where if you really, really want to ignore the mission and just kill your opponent and then just pick up the pieces of the objectives later on, you definitely can. There's very little in this which kind of forces you or highly incentivizes you to, position for, doing the actual mission in the early to mid game instead of dealing with your opponent. It has been said that if you go around and press all of the buttons and reveal all of the HVTs and threaten them, it does take away the possibility of your opponent getting some points. But it doesn't do that for all of the potential points. So we're left with a situation where if you're doing that, like if you played a very pacifist approach game and you just raced around the battlefield, throwing smoke grenades and avoiding your opponent and gathering up the HVTs, there's still enough that your opponent can do at the end of the game and later on in the game to overtake you on objective points. So, yeah, it's not perfect, and it's not sort of lining up with where we're starting to want to see missions go. I'm seeing a lot of talk from people about making it more difficult to sort of get 10 objective points by the end of the game if you've just ignored the objectives start to finish. Some people like my machine learning mechanic, which I have in Neural Net, where objectives just become naturally harder to accomplish in terms of the dice roll required by the time you get to the end. Little bits and pieces like that. I'm planning a new custom mission maybe for later this year where if you don't start capturing objectives early, the potential number that you can get reduces later in the game, meaning that if you're a competitive player wanting to get 10 points for a tournament because you need the maximum objective points as a tiebreaker later on, you're not going to be able to do that by thrashing your opponent in the first turn and just, farming them, so to speak. So thoughts like that are very useful for the ITS meta where we are. I'm sorry if I haven't done a very big, in-depth thing of this mission. There's a bit more to it, with revealing the HVTs and the timing of it. But it's at the end of the day, I've got to rate this, highly compared to stuff like Acquisition and Supremacy, etc., etc. Countermeasures, obviously, absolutely awful mission. Cryogenics has got to be up there. At the moment, I think Supplies and Unmasking are the people's favorite. Those are pretty good missions that we've playtested a lot now and had some really, really good games on. Fireflight, again, it's just a normal sort of kill them kind of mission. Let's just roll through here. Frontline, it's a very playable mission, but again, it's just that polarizing, duopoly really of, go first, kill the opponent, or go second, avoid the opponent, and do the mission at the end, and maybe bring in stuff out of hidden deployment, etc., etc. I don't really think I have a whole lot more to say about this pack. They have still kept Blizzard zones in there, which I think are ridiculous. They have just renamed them and sort of made it more about like zero-G kind of stuff. Whenever I play Infinity against somebody who wants to play ITS, I always plead with them to, agree to ignore that sort of stuff. It just doesn't help the game out a lot because some factions benefit from them more than others, and it doesn't really introduce much in the way of tactical interest in the game as far as my experience goes. So yeah, there is that. Cool. Well, not a lot to report other than that this year. Again, Corvus Belli they're quite conservative with this stuff. They know that they don't play their own game as much as we do. Unsurprisingly, in some ways, you've got. I'm sort of coming around more to the feeling that they are people who show up to work and they've just got to sell miniatures, and the competitor community is just this one sort of peripheral strip around the edge of their customer base, and statistically that's probably what we are in terms of numbers. It would always be nice if the people creating the game and making the decisions about the game cared about the game as much as we do, but let's just end on a thankful note. We've still got a competitive game that we can play. We are still seeing some changes. So when Operation Blackwind came out and when this pack came out, there were changes to Army Builder. Maybe we'll see some more. Here's hoping. If we go for a whole year without seeing any changes, that wouldn't surprise me at all. But with the 2 recent patches, maybe there'll be a new release in the next few months, and we'll suddenly see a nerf to Bear Pods or to Morans or something like that, Unknown Ranger, coming down. So you never know. But for now, it's a mixed review, mixed bag, and hope you enjoyed it.